Oh, it's not going.
Yeah. Yep.
No, it's Friday.
All right.
You don't want the missing 2 minutes or whatever.
Exactly. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Island Transit Board of Directors regular monthly business meeting. This is May 3rd, 2024. My name is Craig Sear. I'm the chair.
Consent to be recorded.
My name is Craig Sear. I'm the chair of Island Transit. I'm calling the meeting to order, and we will now have roll call. Nate Bryant,
I'm here.
Eric Marshall,
Here.
Janet St. Clair,
Here,
Lance Norton,
Here, thank you.
Jill Johnson is, Commissioner Jill Johnson is not in the room. And Commissioner Melanie Bacon is on her way and a little bit late. So we are now, we do have a quorum, I know. So now we're going to move on to the approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So
second,
did you tell them?
Okay. So since we have a couple of, board members not here, we're going to rearrange the agenda. So we're going to get the executive director's report first. And then the third business item will become the first business item. And the other two will move down appropriately. Any objection to that? Any other changes to the agenda?
Can we ask Lance to mute himself?
What's that?
Can we ask Lance to mute himself?
Lance, we're getting a little background information. Is it possible for you to mute?
Yeah, yes.
Thank you. All right, I see no other changes, so all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All right. So this is the time that we set aside for members of the public to speak to the board about subjects of concern or interest or items that are not already set aside for a public hearing. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. Public comment may be ended or modified if the comments become disruptive and are not germane to business at hand. Input requiring lengthy comment is best submitted in writing. And I do want to assure any members of the public that board members do consume and read all comments. We welcome comments. We want to hear from the public. So I'd like to ask, are there anyone here that wants to make a public comment? Last call for public comment.
Celine, is everybody able to unmute themselves?
They're allowed to unmute themselves.
All right, I don't see anybody in the room that would like to make a comment. I don't see any hands raised, so we are closing public comment and we're transitioning to the consent agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Would any board members want to pull something off of the consent agenda? Last call. Commissioner St. Clair, was that?
that was a cough. My apologies. I've got a little tickle.
Oh, that's okay. All right. So, I think we're good to go with the consent agenda. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Hi,
All opposed, consent agenda passes. Now we transition to the executive director's report.
All right. Thank you. For the record, I'm Todd Morrow, the executive director of Island Transit. Previously handed out and distributed the executive director's report, so I'm not going to go over every item, just highlights. And of course, always start with ridership. The good news is that we continue to increase ridership. And in fact, last week, which was the measure, we had 8,211 passenger trips compared to 7,166 the same period a year ago. And so that's an increase of 14.5%, which is really good. The bad news was that compared to the week prior to last week, there was actually a decrease of 5.5%. So we think that was because of weather. We're not really sure, but I think that's because of weather. And our on-demand zone on Camano Island continues to be our highest ridership route on Camano Island. Throughout our on-demand system. And good morning, Commissioner Bacon. Just wanted to give you an update on flat fare implementation. Recall that the board did, implement that at your last board meeting, and as best we can tell, the transition is going well. All participants have been informed of the change, and all the bookkeepers or managers have been told, it's my understanding, what the new fare will be for their particular group. And as best we can tell, we have not received any complaints and only a few questions about it, so we think that's really good. The new fare takes effect May 1, but it won't actually be paid until June 1. And one of the great things that our staff did was they've added QR codes to make it really easy for the groups to actually access the forms that they have to use their payments every month. User's guide has actually been updated as well for our rideshare program, which is good, and it's been condensed. We think it will be easier to read, and it's also easy to access online. So wanted to give you that update. We're pleased so far. Yes, sir.
So, I just want to make a comment about this. I manage Vanpool of Island Transit, and the transition and having everybody understand they're now paying in arrears versus forward. And also, I'm sure the behind the scenes bookkeeping that Stacy and Joanna have to do is somewhat complicated, but having that form just to fill in the mileage and upload the receipts, and that was all I had to do was lovely. I was glad. Anything else, it looks like it's gonna, if that's the way it continues to be, it'll be a really good thing.
Well, that's great, and we'll share that. Robin Goldring, who is the manager for that group, will take that back and thank them. So thank you for that feedback. Also, great news on the staffing front. We, at the end of the month, we have had an increase of 4 from the prior month, so that's great news. And we currently employ 61 coach operators, and we actually have a class right now of 6 coach operator trainees actually in the next room. And next week, they'll be taking their CDL tests, so they're on their way to becoming drivers, which is really, really, really exciting. And we have currently 3 that are the group before that are actually doing their ride, what we call ride share. It's when they're out with other coach operators doing their final training before we set them loose, and they're full-time coach operators as well. And so that's really exciting. And then in addition to that, we have 2 more coach operator trainees that are starting on Monday, which is really, really exciting. And in fact, I don't know if you noticed this in my report, but we now have met our hiring goals for our Camano Island coach operators, which is really great. And so now it's just about working towards more on Whidbey Island. And we do have 2 more recruitment fairs, job fairs that are scheduled. We've found those to be really a great way to get people, because we can quickly screen them on the spot. And those of you who are HR professionals know that timing and being able to streamline and make things quick is really helpful. And so that's been really beneficial. And I applaud our team of people. It's marketing, it's HR, obviously, it's our operations staff that have done just a great job to facilitate all that. So thanks for that good work. Also, just wanted to update you on our surplus vehicle auction. Recall that we had the 4 vehicles through the community surplus program that have been handed over, and each one of those groups has taken their vehicles, and they're really excited. So thank you for approving that. Of course, we always thank board member Norton. He was the one that insisted that we restart that program, and I thought it was a great idea. We also had surplus vehicles in addition to those. We thought we'd sold all of them, but as is sometimes the case, not every buyer comes to pick up their vehicle. So there's in fact 3 vehicles that we have to put into the program again. And if they don't sell this time, these are buses, we will scrap them. And we're allowed to do that. And you have previously passed a resolution surplusing them, so there's no further work that needs to be done with regard to that.
What kind of buses?
Hey, Tom, do you know what type of buses?
They're cutaways and 30-foot, 35-foot. They're older.
Yeah. And then also wanted to just tell you more good news with regard to our rideshare program. We talked about the implementation of the new fare structure. we actually now have 30 active groups, which is terrific. We have 10 of them on Camano Island, 20 of them are based here. And we only have one van that's now available for assignment. And so one of the things that we'll be looking to as we do our transit development plan in the next couple months, we'll be looking at how do we grow that program? What do we do? Because clearly there is some demand, and that's very exciting. And as you know, our ride-link vans are all assigned, which is also good, and they're being used by nonprofits to do important things here in Island County. And then another really terrific thing just to highlight is our most senior coach operator, who's Mark Vance. He's been, when I say senior, he's been here longer than any other coach operators. He competed at the International Bus Rodeo, and that's a big deal. That's the one that American Public Transportation Association schedules, and it's from North America. And it happened to be in Portland, Oregon. And he competed this past weekend and did well. I think he was 21st out of 75. And our operations manager, Sean Harris, was there to help him. And, you know, this has been a dream, and Mark has been working and training for this. And so we're really proud of him. And the neat thing is that we at Island Transit are hosting our own bus rodeo on June 3rd. You all are invited to it. It's on Sunday. And it starts at 9 a.m. and when it concludes, we'll have a potluck here, and we have other food that staff barbecues. So it's a really fun event. We need people to volunteer. One of my job is I get to ride on the bus, and I get to critique how smooth the ride is. So if it's herky jerky, you know, you give them points and things like that. But anyway, it's a really fun day. And the cool thing is, I believe the person that did win the international rodeo, I expect him to be here competing along with Mark. His name is Rob Wood. He's from Inner City in Olympia. And I'm guessing the person that came in second, who's from Community Transit, will also be here, Matt Chomjack, as well. So we'll have the best of the best competing here. We've invited Skagit Transit and others to come. And so it's a really fun thing. Yes, sir.
Do we provide vehicles?
Yeah.
Or they don't bring theirs?
No, yeah, and that's why it's fun to see, because I don't know how people who don't normally drive that particular vehicle can then drive it so well and be expected to perform, but it's one of the miracles that is just unbelievable. I will tell you that Matt Chomjack has been practicing here most weekends with Mark Vance. And they come in early, they set up their cones out there, move vehicles to do this. So he is used to our vehicles, and he always does well. So anyway, it's an amazing thing.
Is this open to the public or is it just by invitation?
Well, we haven't opened it to the public, but you know, bring family members, or if you know someone that wants to come, I'm sure it's fine. We do have to be careful because the course is out there and we have cones, and we try to keep people in certain zones just so nothing bad happens. And I know in the old days, at Community Transit, they actually invited non-drivers to compete in a separate. Yeah, and well, the reason I'm telling you is one of them crashed the bus, and that was the end of that. So, our insurers don't like that. So anyway, but do come. It's really, even if you can just pop in for a few minutes or just come for the food, whatever, it's really a fun thing. And a lot of our coach operators and others bring their families and all of that.
So Todd, did you mean Sunday, June 2nd?
Did I give you the wrong day?
Well,
I did, yeah.
you
It's-
said the
yeah, it is
third.
Sunday, I'm sorry,
Okay.
yeah,
It's Sunday,
June
June 2nd. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
yeah.
Sunday, June 2nd.
June 2nd, here in our Coopville operating base. Yeah, and it starts at 9, but you don't need to get here that early. If you come, and then finally, I just wanted to let you know that our employee association is hosting a taco bar for all the employees, and if you're here at 11, you are welcome to come and join, and we'll be back in the lunchroom as well. That's a fun thing. Part of the proceeds for that comes from raffles that we do, and also the employee association gets the profits from the vending machines, and we also pay dues, and so there's a way to have this income that's not official Island Transit money that actually pays for it, and we've got a great group that makes it fun, and this is to celebrate Cinco de Mayo, and of course it's trade mile, I guess, today. So anyway, it's a lot of fun. If you have any questions, we'd love to answer them. Okay, I'm done. Thank
Okay,
you.
great. Okay, our next item is the solar date.
Yeah, thank you. So we've got a PowerPoint presentation, and I want to thank Celine for creating these slides for me. She took my text and makes it look good, and then Brad, our new planner, also helped with getting photos and other things to contribute to this. And the purpose of this is just to give you kind of an insight into one of the options that we're looking at that I think is really exciting with regard to the property that we just purchased. And it's not necessarily meaning that we're gonna do this. Obviously, you guys are the final decider of that. But I'm really excited about this possibility. And so if we can go to the next slide, this is just a reminder that, as you know, back in December, we acquired the 36-acre seed tree farm that surrounds our property. And if you look at the photo on the bottom middle down there, you'll actually see a good depiction of this property. And this area, the gray area, that's all our current operating base. So you can see how big it's all the way out to the road, Plum Creek Lane, and then over here to Parker Road. So it's huge, and you can see the rows of the trees there. There's actually two different parcels. This parcel we call the north parcel, and this parcel called the east parcel. We did it with the idea that this gives us more options as we move to zero emission vehicles, and we may need some other infrastructure. And if you go to the next slide, one of the critical pieces, as you'll recall, to this is the agreement that we have with Woodby Communal Land Trust. There's actually a conservation easement on all of that property, and which requires it basically to stay in agricultural use purposes. And so in order for us to be able to do something that's not agriculture, because we're not farmers, we need to roll back a portion of that easement. And so we have an agreement with Woodby Communal Land Trust that would allow us to do that, working with them, so long as we basically help them to acquire replacement easements elsewhere. So there's not a net loss of easements. And this only applies, the only portion of the property that I'm going to do this on is the north parcel. That's why I wanted to make sure you understood that. The east parcel will remain with an easement on it. And as part of our memorandum of understanding with the land trust, we have 2 years to complete this process, and we're busy working with them. They're talking to other folks, trying to figure out what opportunities exist and how we can accomplish that. And of course, in addition to the land trust, there's all sorts of other regulatory agencies. So I just wanted to add a bullet there, including the county. There's different zoning and comp plan things that we have to deal with. And of course, EV's Reserve, this is all in EV's Reserve and others. So a lot of work to do, but just wanted to remind you of that. But we see this as really a great opportunity, both for thinking about what we do in the near term and also the long term. Certainly, as I mentioned before, we're planning and assuming that whatever we do will support our zero emission transition and other needs. And at some later point, we'll discuss all of this in greater detail with all of you. We're not expecting any decisions to be made today. This is just kind of a preparatory learning opportunity. In the near term, what we think is likely to happen is that the property will be leased out and managed by someone that's actually interested in using Seed Tree Farm for its current purposes, meaning use the seeds to produce and replace deforested land. And that's what the Seed Tree Farm has been used for, where there's been clear cuts, fires. They harvest the cones and then take the seeds and plant them there. And in fact, there are some very rare species of trees over there that are very unique and are very desired, apparently, by forestry folks. So there's a great demand for that. And so Tom Eichley, our manager of maintenance and facilities, has been working with a couple different groups to review proposals, and we'll bring at some point a proposal back to you. We hope that we can do something that puts this to use until we can use it in the way that we want to use it. Yes, sir.
So for a while, we will be farmers.
Exactly, yes, believe it or not, yeah, I mean, maybe we should all get coveralls and all that stuff. The really great thing about this is, in its current state, it's contributing to decarbonization. I mean, it's sequestering carbon through the trees, and then as you plant trees elsewhere, which is one of the most popular ways to do carbon offsets, we're helping with that as well. So it's really, when you take a moment to think about it, it's a big deal.
So, Todd.
Yeah.
Before we purchased it from Weyerhaeuser,
Mhm.
were they at that time, still in December 2023, actively using this as a tree farm?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's actually an irrigation system there, and there's, Tom has spent a lot of time learning about how they managed it and how it needs to be managed, and it does require work, because you have to mow, and water and some other things, and then, of course, harvest. And so, obviously, we don't want to do that ourselves, but we still want it to be put to good use, and it might make us some money as well, which would be very exciting. All right, next slide, please. And
Hold
then
on,
we'll-
I'm trying to ask a question. Sorry, I'm
Yeah.
remote. So, a couple of clarifications. We purchased this from Weyerhaeuser, or we purchased this from the land trust?
We purchased it from Weyerhaeuser. The land trust has a conservation easement on it.
Okay, that's helpful. The conservation issue, you and I've talked a lot about this in the past. Conservation issues are attached to a property in perpetuity. So, what I hear you saying is on the portion of the property that we're gonna transition, we have to do a mitigation to offset that change by acquiring other conservation easements. Is that correct?
Yes, and we may not acquire them directly ourselves, but we'll help the land trust to do that. Yes.
Yeah, that's what I meant. And
Yep.
then, who determines the, like-kind value to make sure we're swapping out a property of a certain ecological value with another property of the same ecological value?
Sure. So, in terms of the monetary value, there definitely will be appraisals that are made, and we've
Yes.
started to talk about that with the land trust. And then I'm imagining there'll be some sort of other biological review as well that will answer those things. And then ultimately, you, the Island Transit Board of Directors, has to approve, obviously, all of that. So it will come back to you. But those are the things that are great questions. Those are the things that we're working with the land trust on, and they want to make this work. And so they see this as a great opportunity for them as well, and they really appreciate our goals to do the things that we're trying to do.
And those mechanisms are set out in the agreements that were made before we purchased the property. So there's a contractual framework that those sorts of swaps will be made.
Yeah, thanks.
So
Matt.
can you
Can I,
remind us?
get a copy of that, just because I'm very interested in this, because the thing that I trust that we will go through the economic issues.
Uh-huh.
I trust the land trust. I just am interested in, and maybe philosophically, but also maybe in terms of compliance and public interest in this, that we are also, doing a exchange that has equal to or greater than ecological value and how that gets measured. So I would love to see those
Sure.
papers. And
Yeah.
then, in the seed farm, I think this was one of the research parcels that, Weyerhaeuser had on our island. I'm interested if we've reached out to Washington State DNR and they're.
Yes,
forward
we
steps.
have.
Oh, that is so exciting. Okay.
That's what we're talking
I'm
with, right?
geeking
That's
out
what we're
on-
talking. Yeah,
Okay, I'm geeking out on this because one of the things they were doing on our island was looking at climate change and resiliency in our forests. So I would love to
Right.
know if that's still what's going on. So apologize for geeking out on it. This is one of my passions. And my
No.
brother was a research
Yeah,
scientist
no.
for US Forest Service.
and thank you. The Department of Natural Resources is keenly aware and interested, and we're working with them. And in fact, the climate issue that you talked about, the changing forests, that's one of the reasons why this particular seed tree farm is valuable, because
Yes.
it does provide some different species and other things that the thought is might be better in the future, which is
Right,
really
it's the-
exciting. And so
It's the
I'm
connect-
excited, and that's why.
it's the biodiversity, yeah. This is really cool. We can talk
Yeah.
offline. I'm very interested in what we're doing with this.
Yeah, and we'll get you the other thing, and your first question, part of the question, can't remember what it was, but, yeah, sorry, Janet, but we'll get you more information.
Yeah,
about
it's just,
this.
we talked about, the first thing I mentioned was this is
Oh,
conservation and perpetuity in that exchange, and I'm not concerned about that, because you and I have talked at
Yeah.
length about that. And I talked with Ryan about that as well.
right, and exactly, and they're gonna make sure that this is done appropriately. I know their focus is trying to find places to swap out near here, because this is the area that makes sense, given that they're gonna lose potentially 18 acres here, so the area around the outlying field is kind of what they're looking at, and there's some great opportunities, and some which we just can't talk about publicly that.
Yeah,
are being-
I hear. Thank you for.
Yeah.
So I was
for
gonna
bearing
ask,
with me.
thank you, Janet. Matt, can you remind us when the clock started ticking on the 2-year agreement?
It was at the end of December, so we, yeah, so-
End of December.
Thank you, Matt.
sorry, I'm sorry, man, I should have jumped in, but,
That's okay.
No,
No,
that was my, yeah, right around there.
okay, great. Thank you.
okay, so getting back to, the slide here. So the long term, this is getting back to what we potentially would do with a portion of the 18 acres here. Would be to utilize that north parcel, for a couple reasons. One is, it's likely that we may need to do some expansion of our facility here in order to do the battery electric charging and also the hydrogen vehicle servicing. And so we may need some more land just simply to do that. But then also, and that's what zero emission infrastructure refers to. And then also is the possible microgrid or solar panel array. You see in the photo what that can look like. And the exciting thing is that, if we go to the next slide, this can be done in conjunction with prairie restoration. And this is the prairie right here. I think you all know that, which is very exciting. But what we need to do first is due diligence, and we talked a little bit about that with Commissioner St. Clair. And we're already starting to look at, as I referred to, or as I previously mentioned about expanding our facility here, we're working with a consultant to look at what additional things we need to do on this particular operating base in order to accomplish our zero emission transition, and it may need, as I already said, to take some more land for those purposes. So that's our reviewing of site concepts. And then the other critical piece is just to do a critical area review of the 18 acres. And that includes looking at the prairie on wild plants that are already there, but also wetlands and all those other things. And we believe there are no wetlands there because we previously had a study that was part of the purchase and sale agreement, and of course we walked the property. And so we don't think that's a concern, but the critical area review is really, really important because that's the document that as we move forward, whether it's with the county or EV's reserve, or if we have to do any federal environmental stuff, that's the document that you use for that purpose, and it has a shelf life of 5 years. And so we need, professionals to do that, and we have a firm, in fact, that we've been using on the south end of the island that we're gearing up to actually perform that for us. And then, of course, a survey, and the survey has been done already of the 2 parcels. And then ultimately, this due diligence will be coming back to you all, and we'll be looking at, what really are the options and what makes sense. And with regard to the kind of the zero emission aspect, obviously, in doing with prairie restoration, this is something that is done across the country. I don't know if any of you have been to any of these places, but the photos that Celine and Brad provided here shows you how it actually is done. The panels are placed in the prairie or in the area. Obviously, we would have to remove the trees to do this. And then plantings are made, and this is done throughout the country as a good kind of a good win-win. And if we go to the next slide, obviously, if you have a solar panel array, you're producing green electricity. which we're never gonna have enough of at Island Transit probably. And it allows us to be less dependent on the Puget Sound electric grid. And then also provides backup power should that grid go down as well. So there's a lot of advantages to having being able to produce our own electricity. I cannot answer and tell you how much we would be able to produce. I'm sure Councilmember Seer is anxious to ask that question. I don't know yet. But we will figure that out at some point along the way, obviously. And then if we go to this,
Just one
yeah,
second. So the very first slide of this slide deck.
Yeah.
The lower right corner, I think it was showed a set of roof panels over a parking area.
yeah.
Is that something that, is that being considered?
We haven't yet, but yes, it is. The challenge with that is you then have to have posts. And so, for instance, we're having a bus rodeo on June 2nd. That, you know, doing those sorts of things is problematic, but maybe on this side of the building where we don't have to do those things. Yes, those are all sorts of things that we'll look at.
I mean,
Yeah.
when we did the site visit
Right,
of what was it?
Sunline.
Sunline Transit.
Yeah,
That was an impressive.
Right.
Installation they had there, and they also had an adjacent property with
exactly.
panels everywhere, so
Yeah,
that was 5 acres, I think.
right. And so that's, you know, we'll be looking at all those things. And the exciting thing about if you do prairie restoration or agriculture with this, it actually has some extra benefits as well. And one of them, of course, is preserving our prairies, which have rapidly disappeared. I don't know that that statistic, less than 3% is correct. I've seen 1%. You know, it's one of the most endangered parts of our ecosystem across the country. But obviously the value of these prairies, as you can see in the photos, it supports pollinators. I don't think we'll have cactus with bats here, but I guess it's possible.
Are you working with Pacific Rim Institute?
We haven't reached out yet, but that's one of the
Because
groups.
that's one of their.
Yeah, their expertise, yeah. And of course, whenever you have plant life, it removes carbon from the air, which is, you know, really important. You're sequestering carbon, which is great. Obviously, preserving the prairie is also very important to our First Nations, because this was their creation and what they took care of. And of course, it provides food and cover for indigenous creatures. So there's a number of reasons why you want to do it. And, you know, I think just looking at these photos that Brad and Celine provided helps to give you an understanding. And then this next slide, this gets to the question you were just asking. There are a number of groups on Whidbey Island in particular that are interested in this sort of thing. And so we have great local resources. I've also met with Steve Erickson, who used to be in charge of WEEN and now is a consultant there. And just yesterday I met with Kathy D. Almeida, who does the Whidbey Environmental Fund. But of course, PRI is our next door neighbor. And then of course, EV's Reserve, we have a great relationship with them. Whidbey Community Land Trust, Sierra Club, which is thrilled with our transition plan. So there's a number of organizations and we're going to reach out to all of them as we move forward. But this is just a great win-win because it helps to accomplish what we all want to accomplish. And then if you go to the next slide, this I think is really important. Because having green things, living things under a solar panel actually helps the solar panels to function better. If you have just concrete or gravel, it reflects heat, which makes, believe it or not, the panels to be less efficient. So the things that we're learning is amazing. And then also the maintenance costs ultimately are lower. Go to the next slide. In the near term, obviously, there's a lot of work to get the prairie up and going. And you have to mow to a lower height and, you know, take care of noxious weeds, things like that. And year 2, things start to grow a little bit higher. And then years 3 and 5, you don't have to mow as frequently and you just do spraying as needed. And the key thing is it just needs to be at least 36 inches, the lowest point of the panels, at least 36 inches high. And then, of course, we would have to figure out how close they should be so that there's sunlight and air and all those sorts of things. But anyway, it's being done successfully and we can do it here too if we want to. That concludes my presentation, and if you have any other comments or questions, we'll talk a lot more about this later, but I just wanted to get you excited.
So I received a call from a member of WEAN
Yeah,
in the leadership team, and they are really excited about this, and that Island Transit is open to partnering with them. And in that conversation, I learned an interesting phrase, which I never heard before, which is old growth prairie. And that was fascinating to hear, and I called that out and got a great education. And there is old growth prairie somewhere in this area, literally that's never seen the plow, never touched. And so, that's one thing I wanted to mention. The other thing is that, the state is interested in prairie restoration. There's funding available, which was interesting to hear. So there's so many wonderful, positive things about this whole project. So kudos to, staff that worked on this. I certainly learned a lot from the staff.
good.
Very interesting about the gravel
Yeah.
and heat reflection too, so.
Janet has
All right,
Craig,
think
I have
we-
a question.
Janet has her.
oh, I'm sorry, Janet, thank you, yeah.
Sorry, it's hard to be online, but, and you have to pay attention to that room too. I have one request, that, we do as part of this process, because I haven't done it myself. Todd, would you please check to see how much of this parcel is over a critical aquifer recharge area? And how that might impact what we plan where on the parcel. And ask one of your staff to research the nexus between solar powers and impact on recharge. I had read something a while ago about that, and so I just want to make sure we're attentive to all the factors being on an island. So if we could just add those questions into our due diligence.
And Commissioner, you said recharge, is that the word you?
Yes, it's called an aquifer recharge, and we have in Island County
Oh,
mapped
got it,
out
okay.
our critical recharge areas. And we
Yeah, no, I
make sure-
got that. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, right.
So obviously I wasn't here when this purchase was made, but you mentioned there's two parcels. We're gonna activate one of the two parcels. Were they sold as two parcels, or were they, why purchase the east parcel if we're only gonna activate the north parcel?
We purchased them because they wanted both to be sold. We didn't have any choice, and we paid about $464,000
Okay,
for 36 acres.
all right, thank you.
Other questions? Anybody?
And I would just point out, we do have supposedly virgin prairie on our property. It's back in the triangle there. Those of you who I've forced you to go on a tour here have seen it. It's fenced off, and so we do have that here on our property that we are actually own.
All right, I just wanted to call out Lance, do you have any questions?
No, am I unmuted?
You are unmuted.
Oh, okay. Sometimes I talk when I'm muted. That's what my wife used to like. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, so now we're moving on to business item number 2, as it was originally called out on the agenda. And this is amending the bylaws of Island Transit Board of Directors.
Yeah, just to refresh your recollection, this was something that was asked and we needed to do because we changed the board composition. We added another member. And so we needed to amend the bylaws. And I think there was also the hope that perhaps we could do something in the bylaws that would address what to do when you have a typo. We were not able to come up, despite a lot of good work by our lawyer, Matt, and Meg Hebner, with a solution for that. However, given that amending the bylaws is before you, we wanted to update them to reflect the latest in the Open Public Meetings Act laws. So you'll see a number of edits. That's what that all is. And really the only other change is to indicate that our board now has 6 members, 6 of whom shall be elected officials.
Seven members, 6 voting members.
Correct. And then 2 members, instead of having 2 members from the governing body of the county, we now have 3. So that's the material change in addition to the Open Public Meetings Act. And I'm sure Matt can answer any other questions that you might have. And You know, if you wanna adopt this today, we're ready to do that, but if you wanna direct us to do something additional, we can bring this back to you.
So this is
So,
Janet.
board members, any questions?
Yeah, that's a
Yes,
question.
this is Janet.
Janet?
So I read through this and it all looks fine. I remain concerned about how we got here and the potential for a split vote. And would welcome a conversation at a future board meeting of the solutions you explored. And, you know, there's a reason you have an odd number of board members often. I don't anticipate this being an immediate problem, but I do have that as, you know, we always want to anticipate all things for the future. And so having a even numbered board does create a problem for us potentially. And we don't have in front of us a solution to that problem if we ever have a split vote.
I just thought of something, what if just as this really would end up being a discussion with my colleagues and perhaps, but. What if the Board of County Commissioners only had 2 votes, had 3 members and 2 votes, and the Board of County Commissioners would decide which of those 2 would be the voting members?
Or you have an ad hoc
I'd
member.
have to do some look at that because it's prescriptive in the statute of how we come to the number of board members.
Mhm.
And that review is done every 4 years under the statute.
Okay.
Well, I remain concerned about that. I appreciate Melanie, the chance to try to figure out a solution. I think you're right on. I would love to just continue to hold this in front of us in trying to figure out what happens if we had a split vote, only because you don't want to wait till you're in a tense and crisis situation to figure out the solution to that problem.
Well, the solution is kind of self-evident. The requirement, and we did a fair amount of surveying locally, and actually I did some national survey. The concept is it requires a majority of the quorum, so it's just math at that point that, in our case, the math is that we would require if all 6 voting members are present, then an affirmative vote equals 4 as opposed to an odd number. It's just
I see what you're
whatever the
saying.
math is.
Yeah, so
That doesn't
essentially-
need to be specified in our bylaws, because basically it would be that a decision would fail for lack of majority.
Correct, and actually, I drafted some language to that effect, that explicitly requires the majority of the voting members present in a quorumed meeting is an affirmative vote, so I added that language in this draft here.
All right.
Janet, thank you for bringing that up because I asked those questions of Matt as well in a conversation at least a month ago. And Matt pointed out, as he just did now, that if we did have a tie vote, that's our decision. We have said that whatever we're talking about is not approved, or voting about is not approved. So 4 votes are required. If it only gets 3, then whatever the resolution is or issue, we're not moving forward on it. It's not approved. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, I was just gonna also add, in the legislative front down in Olympia, there are usually efforts every year to change who votes and who's on public transportation benefit area boards. And it may be that this coming legislature will do something that would require us to do something that then would address the issue, meaning add a voting member, whether includes the union rep becoming a voting member. That's one thing that has been talked about, or a citizen or some representative of some other group joining the board and being a voting member. So this is an ongoing issue on the state level as well, and we'll see what happens there. That might address it for you.
Okay,
Thank you.
anything else?
Thank you.
All right, Todd.
Yes, sir.
could Somebody call Jill Johnson and see, do we know if she's gonna make it?
I think she's at a medical.
She's not available. I talked to the clerk this morning. She's not available this morning due to
Okay.
the personal issue.
Okay. Okay, so, let's see, bylaws, and now oh, you know what, I'm sorry, I skipped an item.
Is the intent to take action?
Oh, exactly. Do we have a motion? Thank you.
I move to adopt resolution 5-24, amending the Island Transit Board of Director bylaws attached as Exhibit A and incorporated into this resolution by this reference, superseding any previous resolutions approving bylaws effective as of May 3, 2024.
I'll
Second.
second.
Moved, Councilmember Jenny Bride, seconded by Commissioner Bacon. Any other discussion? Ready to vote? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Motion carries. We have amended bylaws. All right. Apologize for skipping, an item here, which was amending resolution 3-19, authorizing certain persons to sign warrants on behalf of Island Transit.
Right, and this is a continuation of the discussion you all had at your last meeting. The purpose of this resolution is just to swap out a name of one of our former employees that retired and replace it so that we actually have four board authorized signers. And the fourth name to replace that one is Dan Heverling, our new finance manager. So it includes our financial controller, myself, and our HR and HR and administrative manager. And then the new one would be Dan Heverling. And just by way of information, I think it was 2 weeks ago, maybe when I was on vacation, and it turned out that we had the other two people that were still authorized weren't here. And so really having that fourth helps us. So if there are any questions or comments, you can certainly try to answer those. Thank you. Thank you.
Excuse me, I have a, I just noticed something in the motion. It says that we're amending resolution 319. But on the actual resolution, it says superseding 319. So Matt, can you provide clarification? I'm sorry, I have just noticed that.
Well, it'd be both superseding, this new language would take the place. And I've got an echo here, and name the specific four people, so it's basically superseding is probably the more proper word for it.
So
Thank you.
I want to ask. Am I okay too? No, I'm not. Okay, so I want to ask, are these four future signatories, they're replacing a person that retired. And as I understand it, there's at least one other person that currently is authorized to sign. Is that correct?
Well, I think that was an error. We do not control oftentimes the bank's requirements of who they choose to have people do things. And I think that there was a thought that this new employee who replaced the one that retired automatically superseded. And in fact, I think there was one bank that actually did take action to include them, even though the board had not approved that. And so we're just clarifying this, and we've stopped, I believe, that person from signing. And so now it's just these four people that you approve, and that's, most banks require, or other institutions require, a board authorization, and so we'll be restricted to these four.
You
Who was
usually
the
have to
person
bring,
that was saying here? Oh, go ahead, Janet, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Janet.
we will need, if passed, we will need to bring this resolution to our banks. That's typically on all the
Right.
boards I've been on. This resolution goes with us to the bank. They then correct
Yeah.
all the names, and it's still a two-touch system, as I note here, any two of the four.
Yeah.
So it still meets gap. When we're ready, I'm happy to move approval.
Who was the individual that was signing?
It was the payroll specialist.
Was that a formal motion?
I was waiting till discussion ended, Matt. Thank you for the
Any other
question.
discussion? Okay, it looks like discussion's over.
I'll move to approve resolution 24 superseding resolution 319.
Second, anybody?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of passing resolution number 4-24, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, where are we? I think we have come to other business. Is there other business?
The finance report.
Oh, yes, finance report.
Well, thank you. Good morning. I'm going to talk about the finance report for March of 2024. And the first slide, I start off with cash sources. Sales tax revenue was down about $5,000, about 0.5% from last year's actual in March. And what we also saw is significant contract revenue. You can see almost $4 million. Second slide, please. If we look at sales tax graphically, you can see that our sales tax was down about 46,000 or 3% below what we had budgeted. And the green line, again, you can see where we're standing in terms of budget versus actual. Let's say the last 6 months, it's been below what we had budgeted for each month. For the year so far, we're almost 23% where we would expect 25%. And so we're actually, there's a little typo there, it's actually about 2% behind our actual budget. For the year. Contract grant revenue, as I said, there was about $4 million that came in. Here's the breakout. We had the 4 operating grants here: transit, mobility management, connectors, and equalization. And that totals almost $4 million. We also had some significant miscellaneous revenue. We had a diesel fuel tax refund, about $21,000, and unleaded fuel at almost $19,000.
Quick question, Paul, on the equalization revenue, is that as expected? Because I know that can vary.
Was that as expected?
Yeah.
You know, I think it is as expected. It does vary depending on the level of service that we provide and our total expenditures. That's how it's determined. But that we're pretty much on target as to what we expected for those months.
Thanks.
And to be clear, the legislature awards us a total amount. Paul just can't bill it all at first. He has
Yeah.
to, that's why there's the fluctuation. So we do know the total amount that we'll get through the biennium.
Okay.
It's
So this-
based on the, like I said, the level of service and the total expenditure.
Okay, so this is like going back 3 or 4 months, right?
Yeah, this is actually for equalization. It went from July of 23 to January 24.
Aha, 6 months, 7 months, okay.
Thanks.
Quite a bit going. Investment interest rates, March investment, interest was over $100,000. It was up about 7%, 6,700 from the month before. We had, in March, we had 58.5 million invested. And on this chart, the green line is the ICTIP. You can see the rate that they, the interest rate that they pay out. And it's just showing once again against the LGIP and the 2-year treasury. If you're watching in the news, you probably are aware that interest rates are back on the rise a little bit. You can see that on the graph with the blue line.
Yeah.
Next slide, please. Cash uses, March payroll payments, 1.2 million. Now, this is on a cash basis. This is how much money we actually physically paid out in March. It was up 438,000, almost 55% from last month, and up 448, or almost 57% from last year. Non-payroll payments of almost 410,000 was down 448, or about 52% from last month, and up 87,000, about 27 from last year. So the non-payroll can fluctuate based on the capital purchases. The payroll, as you notice in your payroll report, the accrued amount is probably just slightly over $1 million, but we had some crossover for when sometimes a month's payables, like our benefits, are paid in a following month, so it just got crossed over.
Thought we had that long. Insurance payment.
Yeah, so insurance is a big one. Okay, next slide, please. Capital payments, very small in March. We had a little bit of Terry's Corner Comfort Station, 9,300, and electric chargers, residual charge of about $99. Cash reserves, you can see, we had a March increase, 3.6 million in some, and our total cash now is about 63 million. Cash reserves, so you can see it graphically, March, we're showing a significant increase in our graph, and once again, it's up about 3.6 million. Next slide, please. Budget actual revenue. You can see our target is 25%. We're 3 months into the year, and Fairs has exceeded that with the big influx of federal and state operating grants that came in excess. Just in the last month, you can see we beat 20% target, 25% target, and you can see all the other categories were below that target. The only thing I'd say there is concerning, perhaps, just a watch is on our sales tax, where we're 2% behind years.
Yep.
Next slide, please. Expenses, see, once again, our target is 25%, and payroll is slightly below that. Now you can see there's a couple areas where we've exceeded that. You know, we have supplies, communications slightly above the 26%, and subscriptions at 29%, but otherwise we're below our target in all of our other areas. So that's good news. And that, I believe, is the end. Any questions?
Not germane, but I have a question for Todd. Did we make any progress on the comfort station work we're doing at Terry's Corner with the real estate department at the state?
We're still waiting, no.
Okay.
Thank you for asking, and thanks for your efforts.
My futile efforts, but yeah, appreciate it.
Any other questions, comments for Paul? All right, now we are moving to board member comments. Are there any comments from board members? Well, I have a comment.
I guess I have one. Do we have any update on what's happening, anything that's happening down south? The south property?
Yes.
That's an executive session.
Oh, that's coming up, okay.
The answer is yes.
The answer is yes.
All right, so, I'm just really pleased to announce that the Langley Chamber of Commerce, received funding from Island Tourism and plans to present a fireworks drone show on July 6th. You may recall that Langley said goodbye to.
I think it's recommended and going to a vote this week, Craig. I don't think it's a problem, but it's a recommended vote.
LTAC, I chair the LTAC committee. The LTAC has recommended that it be approved by the Board of County Commissioners. Board of County Commissioners has not looked at that.
I'm going to rewind everything I said, and I'll leave the same board comments next month.
Okay.
But thank you for calling that out. I understand that it was approved. Now
It's
I understand.
wonky.
Yeah, that's silly. All right, now I think let me just see here in my agenda. I think we are now moving into our executive sessions. So, let's see, I have a script here. Just a second. So, right, I'm going to, close this regular business meeting, and we're going to transition to an executive session. In a couple of minutes, actually, I want to take a 3-minute break, and I'll be back in a second.
Is recording on it.
Joe, do you know how long do you think? 10 minutes, 15 minutes?
No, it's still recording.
Mr. Dog. This meeting is being recorded.
No.
Hi, just for the record, the executive session is to discuss with legal counsel potential legal risk. There'll be 2 of those for 15 minutes, commencing when the board reconvenes. There'll be no action taken on either of those, and then there'll be a 3rd executive session that will announce the time for when that time comes in the meeting. The meeting will be closed to the public, only to board members. And it's not anticipated action will be taken, but we will get back onto the recording at that appropriate time. Stop the recording right now. The board is about to read.
Do we have any members of the public that are on
Not, they won't be on this.
with the dog?
But I think we've got a couple of consultants.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, so we are now going to meet the executive session to review the performance of public employee. The board will be in executive session until
For 20 minutes.
for 20 minutes, and after 11. Yes, we're gonna invite you to depart now. Thanks for coming.
Specific, you want to make sure.
Okay.
Never mind.
We need to admit with the observer.
Yeah.
Yes,
Oh.
I'll admit them. Or you got that? Okay.
All right, I am calling the regular meeting of the Island Transit Board, our May regular meeting back to order. Coming out of executive session, I do not know of any other business that needs to be transacted. And so I am adjourning this meeting.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, Janet.